This is our dear sister, Annie, and she's been a pillar in our community. And she's been around, since the early days in the robe. And so I'm going to start off by asking you, Annie, how did you first meet Amen?
Well, it was pretty unexpected. I had gotten to our first big meeting, the first one that I was in. That was in Washington, D.C. in 1980. And all the brothers and sisters were gathering from all around the states. And I was there walking behind long, tall Robert, who told me that we'd be changing partners after that. And I was kind of resistant about that because Robert was pretty easy to walk with, even though he kept me walking day and night sometimes. So I get up, he takes me to this bus, and I get on the bus, and there are a bunch of sisters cutting up vegetables on their on trays, all sitting on the floor. And so I sit down by a sister and get my tray of vegetables and start cutting them up. And here come two brothers, and they come and they stand in the front of the bus, and the sister whispers, "There's Amen." And I'm looking at him and I'm so expecting, there to be neon lights around him and lightning bolts coming off him. And I wasn't sure which one it was. And I was so disgusted with myself. It was like, I don't even. And then he spoke, and it was him and Michael. And he was the one with the long white beard and the incredible kindness. And his question was simple. It was, "So, what? How are you guys all doing?" And I borrowed Mariah's glasses. I'd been going pretty much blind because I'd left all that stuff behind. Everything, driver's license, social security card, glasses. I've heard of brothers that left their teeth behind even when they had false teeth, but I didn't have any yet at that point. So I was just, I borrowed Mariah's glasses. She handed them to me so I could see him better. They were exactly the prescription I had. And I was like, wow, that was like something I'd asked God if when Amen came, I could see him clearly. And there he was, clear as crystal. And then it all, shuffled off, and we had a big meal and went on.
You know, I'm thinking like that's the first time you met Amen physically.
Right.
But before you met him, you did a pilgrimage and you actually connected with him on the inside when you met the brothers, right? Which is what actually got you to that place.
Well, that's totally correct. I was uh, I was a reporter and writer for the Tallahassee Democrat at the time, and I went into the office one night. I was getting this story together about single in the city for and standing in front of the bulletin board were these four figures, these four men, and they were all wearing these long white robes, and their feet were kind of dirty, and it was cold outside. It was in late November, 44 years ago. And I was like, who are these guys? Because they were standing right under this picture that the photographer had taken that showed me I was in the room. The photographer brought it to me because he said it was so unusual. And the man was standing like in front of a mat to highlight his face, and it was like a box around him. And I was kind of headed out the door laughing, and he was reaching out to me with this look on his face of, don't go. And on the wall between was this typewriter. And typewriters, it's a little gray typewriter, a manual. And writing has always been, honestly, my first love. I probably cared more about my daughter, but I loved writing almost as much as that. And that was what was holding me because my daughter had already gone to live with her dad that year, as a matter of fact. So, in a lot of ways, I was cut free, except for that typewriter. And I'm heading out the door, and the photographer comes to me afterwards and shows me the picture. And I immediately sat down and typed out a title for it. It said, Let Go and Let God. And then I put it on the bulletin board. And the brothers were standing right under that picture, which was certainly a sign to me that something different was taking place. So I go up to them and I say, So what guru do you guys follow? They said, No guru, sister. We're traveling Christians. The keys to the kingdom of heaven are no killing, no sex, no materialism, vegetarian, for love of the animals, for love of God. And I was like, it was like, and they said, the Lord is back. And it just blew me away. I felt like I'd just been kicked in the stomach because I didn't want to believe that, because several years before that, reading a book by a yogi that I've never seen again or before, and I don't remember the yogi's name, but it was like a book about the highest spiritual path. And the highest spiritual path that this guy described was basically no killing, no sex, no materialism. And when I read it, I thought, well, that was the life of Jesus Christ. And if I ever meet anyone doing that in the name of Christ, I'm going to have to go with them, because that really is the final frontier. So here these guys are saying that, and I can see that in their reflection. I mean, there they are walking barefoot in a pretty cold evening and looking so happy about it all. So I had to stand there and argue with them for a while, like, no sex, what are you talking about? Well, sister, when you're living this way, you need to be looking at everybody as a brother or sister. And I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense to me. You sure can't take a family down the road. Not that there's anything wrong with families. God knows they were instituted in the garden itself. But this was a special call for a messenger, and it had only been like 6 months before, after a pretty wild life and a lot of experiences that I won't get into. They're in the book. I had given my life back to God. I mean, it was like, all right, Father, you let me do everything I wanted to do. It hasn't worked out. I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do. Emotions, I'm
Good.
full of them.
Yeah.
So, um, so I invited them home with me. I didn't really want them to come home with me. I had a date that night with a philosophy professor from the nearby University of Florida, I guess it was. But I trusted him implicitly. But I went home and I stayed on the phone. I lived like 14 miles out of town in this cute little cottage under these Spanish oaks, and it was like a little dream spot for me. And I went home and I got on the phone almost immediately, because I gave them my number and told them to call me if they needed a place to stay. I got on the phone almost immediately and stayed on it for as long as I could. And as I hung up, just as I was hanging up, it rang. And I picked it up, and sure enough, it was Duncan, one of the brothers that had been doing most of the talking, the point man, we called him sometimes. And so I was, okay, surrender. I told them how to get to my house, and sure enough, they showed up, and right right before, right after they came, the um, the professor showed up, and he kind of looked at him, didn't have too much to say, and put his go to hell cowboy hat back on his head and ushered me out the door and warned me about, going for cults and all that while we had our steak and martinis. And there just wasn't anything I wanted to talk about with him. I wasn't interested in any of his philosophies. My heart stayed back there with the brothers. And the end result of that was giving everything up 3 days later and going out with them. And when I went to talk to my editor about it, uh, he just kind of, how can you do this? And I said, he said, you got to give me notice. I said, well, if I give you notice, then I'll be having to walk by myself because I know God is calling me and I got to go. I gave my life back to him and this is what he wants from me. I feel certain of it. He said, well, and I said, besides, the guy that I replaced as a feature writer just got back to town. He said, okay, write and tell me about it. So that was 44 years ago. As soon as I came off the road 7 years later, I immediately wrote it all down. And I've been working on it now and rewriting and refining for the last 35 years, 39 years actually. So this is a story that I hope you will want to read. It's called In the Wake of Amen, and it's the story of my pilgrimage, which is basically a story of a great deal of grace because I was not an easy rider. I was I was pretty resistant to following and listening and obeying. And because it's such a free will ride, this ride on the road, this walk down the road, it's like you can walk off anytime you want to. In fact, you're encouraged to walk off.
That's amen. That's the way he is.
And that's the way Amen is. He is the ultimate free will person. He will not tell you to do something that you don't want to do except once. And if you don't want to do it, that's up to you. Go where you want, do what you want. That's the way God runs the whole world. If God didn't run the whole world that way, we would have a much kinder world.
I have one question for you, Annie, just to close it. If there was one simple message you wanted to give to everybody in a sentence or two for the whole world.
I think the most important thing we can all do and the most enjoyable thing in the world to do is to love one another. And if you love God, as so many people claim to, you will love one another because that's the only way to demonstrate that you love God.
Amen.